there really are no rules in business, meaning you can do things however you want. Like there's no set way that says you have to exit like this or you have to do things this way. That's like kind of the
Yes.
fun of entrepreneurship.
Preach.
Like
Please preach.
you can get super creative.
Yeah.
And like the way that we structured this exit was really creative, but it served everybody, which was really cool. And so I think that the piece that I will say, what you touched on is be courageous. And sometimes that means speaking up your truth and being like, hey, this doesn't work for me anymore.
Welcome to the Moxie Podcast. This month, we are talking about all things entrepreneurship, although we do talk about that most of the time. But this month specifically, we're talking about bootstrapping to scale. I've actually never really brought this topic to the podcast about what it takes to actually scale a business and do it well and in a sustainable way. So I'm excited to have Taylor on the Moxie Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for hosting. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, the first and foremost, we want people to get to know who you are. So I will say I've had the privilege already with working with Taylor with our company and what we're doing on the back end. And so we'll get to touch on that a little bit, but would love to hear, because when I asked you onto the podcast, you surprised me and told me you had other businesses that you've started and scaled. So why don't we just start with telling our listeners what you're best known for? Maybe we'll start there and then get into some questions after that.
Yeah, I love it. So my name is Taylor. I am the Chief Revenue Officer and co-owner at Best Practice Media, is the current firm that I'm part of. And I have been in the paid marketing, like funnel acquisition space for the last 8 years, and really kind of grew up here, mostly in e-commerce, but also working with a ton of coaches, consultants, people that are selling online courses. And I think what most people know me as is the ability to help brands scale very quickly. And then also a deep knowledge of sales, marketing, strategies around like how do you connect with other entrepreneurs, create a shared vision, and then execute. But yeah,
I
that's
love
a little bit about me.
I love it. So let's back up a little bit because this is what you're known for, right? In the last 8 years, this is what has been focused. But what even got you to being like, wow, I think I'm pretty good at this?
Yeah. So I actually have kind of a crazy story, not super crazy, but just a little unique. So I was working in corporate America, um, selling big enterprise software solutions. So I worked at a company called Adobe, which a lot of people have heard of, and then worked at a smaller marketing company called Yext, which focused on local businesses. And I was selling to massive enterprises. So my customers were like Gap, Restoration Hardware, Victoria's Secret, Lululemon. Like we worked with a lot of those big retailers. And we would roll out these like really cool strategies, right? Around how do you
Mm.
scale online. And then like a year would go by and the strategies would maybe get partially implemented, right? Because there's
They
so
pay
many moving pieces.
they pay all the money to get the strategy and say we're gonna do something, and then a little bit happens.
Eh, No, exactly. Like we would do these things and it was like pulling teeth trying to get this stuff approved and out the door for these big corporations. And it was cool and fulfilling, but there was so much red tape. It was also very frustrating. And so near the end of my tenure at Yext, I was just kind of frustrated with the space. And I was like, there's got to be a way to like help smaller ecom brands grow, right?
Mm.
Because these big players are so big that they can't get out of their own way. But there's got to be, and I was kind of new to the mom and pop ecom space at that point, right? Kind of the startups. And so I got connected and I had two desires. One, I wanted to help people like actually implement what these big corporations couldn't do. And then the second desire is I wanted to make some more money, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're kind of capped in corporate America on what you could make. My wife and I had just had a baby. We live in Santa Cruz, California, which is like outrageously expensive for anything. So we're like, could we get a little extra money coming in? Right? Was the desire. So I got connected to this guy that owned a little marketing agency. They had 2 clients. He was doing everything for them. We got connected. We hit it off. I said, hey, man, I'm pretty good at sales. Like, why don't you let me grow your agency? And then you just pay me a commission on the deals I close.
Mm.
He's like, cool. So this was in like August of, I don't remember the date, but August. We start working together. In like 3 months, I have almost 20 clients that we've closed in this tiny little agency. And he was just paying me a little commission on all the deals I closed. So we're kind of coming to the end of the year. And I'm like, hey, man, why don't you make me a partner? Like, let's do this 50-50. You can see I'm good at this. I took us from like 2 to 20. Revenue's way up. Like, let's build this thing out. And he's like, okay, let's do it. So we formed a 50-50 partnership. And this brand was called Focus Funnels at the time. And we started this little micro agency. And for a whole year, I worked like full-time at Focus Funnels and full-time at Yext.
Oh my
Like,
goodness.
so doing the corporate sales, which if anyone's been in corporate sales, especially in software, it's a grind. You're on the road every week. You know, there's a ton of pressure on you. They give you really big numbers. It's very stressful. And on the side, I was building this marketing agency. And so there were some fun things that I would do is because I was on the road so much, I would go to these places and I'd look around. I'd do some research before I got there. Obviously, I would do my corporate job and crush there, right? Take care of everything. But there was a lot of downtime. So on that downtime, I would find local e-commerce brands and I'd go meet them. I'd be like, let me take you to coffee or go get drinks or something.
Yeah.
And we were, I mean, at this time, there was 3 of us at Focus Funnels. Like we
Yeah.
were nobody. But here was this guy like traveling to their town, taking them out to drinks, like engaging with them. Like no other agencies were doing that, like at this space. So it made us look and feel like a lot bigger than we were.
Yeah.
And so we were able to grow really fast because I was like boots on the ground. And then it helped that I had a travel budget that was paid for by my corporate job, right? So like
Yeah.
I I don't know about the legality or, you know, of all of it, but like let's not talk about that. But I was able to during that year, it was literally one of the hardest years of my life. Like I mean, I was working from sun up to sundown, just grinding away. But like I started to see the vision. We started stacking in better clients, more revenue. And so that's really the backstory of how I started the first agency, Focus Funnels.
I want to talk about that too, because I think a lot of people that enter into, let's just, yeah, entrepreneurship space, no matter like where you're at or what sector it's in, um, we do it for, yeah, let's make a little bit more money. You know, for me, it was a very different journey in the nonprofit into a for profit, but I'm a little
Yeah.
skewed in my story. But so we do it for a little bit, you know, more money. We do it for quote unquote more time. And then we
Yeah.
realize, oh my gosh, like this isn't an overnight thing. So what would be the biggest advice you'd give to someone who maybe is in their first year? Because I think, and even that, I forget to reflect. I need to reflect a lot more and like speak gratitude into that self that made this what it is today. Because we 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 worked our asses off to get to where we are, and I think people just like want to skim over that. So what would be some just like practical advice you would give to someone who maybe is in that first like 1 to 3 year spot right now?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the first thing is it's hard.
Yeah.
Like it's just hard work. And people talk to me all the time, like, how did you get so when I exited Focus Funnels literally 2 months ago, we were doing 7 figures of revenue every
Mm-hmm.
year. And we had at one point we had 20 full-time employees. You know, we were managing over 50 different customers. We were working with top shelf brands. That did not happen overnight. It took me 5 years of building to get to that point. But
Mm-hmm.
everyone wants to skip over that part.
Yeah.
So the first thing is you have to do the hard work. And in today's culture, there's all of these people talking about how we're going to 10x your revenue and like you'll barely lift a finger. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, you're moving a rock up a hill. And the only way
Yeah.
to get that rock up the hill is you have to push it. And there is no shortcut. And you may get some lucky breaks, but those lucky breaks, and I put air quotations on lucky breaks, means that you were in the right place doing the right things consistently for a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then those lucky breaks just happened to be there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the first advice I give to someone is don't be afraid of doing hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what's going to differentiate you from 98% of the people in the field. The
Mm-hmm.
second advice is detach from outcomes. There were months where I would go out and grind away at stuff and nothing would happen.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't change my output. I
Mm-hmm.
still took the actions every day because there were some months where those lucky breaks would happen. I do air quotes at the end because I don't really believe in luck, but like those things would come together where all of that work, think about farming. I planted all those seeds, and then a couple months later, they would reap fruit, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
second thing is be patient, like
Mm-hmm.
detach from the outcomes, get really good at the inputs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is you wake up, you do the work, you stay positive, you connect with people, you add value, and then the stuff comes back. In today's hustle culture, people are trying to rush it. Like they
Mm-hmm.
want to be supporting these top tier brands like as an agency. I'm like, bro, you're not even ready for that yet.
Yeah.
Start here. Like get the fundamentals, put in the input. So I know that was like a whole host of things, but be patient, do the work, and like get really good at the inputs.
I love it. No, I think I one thing that you said that's so important is consistency. Um because it's consistency over a very like a period of time. We're not just talking
Yeah.
about a consistent month. It's a period of time. And I would say in my entrepreneur journey, this is something that I really struggle with is the patience to see results and to trust the process, and to also trust my intuition. So when we first met, in the beginning of this year, I think that, I mean, this was something that I expressed to you because it's like, man, we've been putting it in, and we just have not found maybe the right thing or the right partner or whatnot.
Right.
And other elements of our business and stuff, excelling, but specifically in the ecom. So, and this is what we're kind of concentrating here right now is ecom. It takes a lot of diligence in this. And I'm not saying not an ecom doesn't, because in any business that you're doing, man, it takes consistency and time and to keep trying, because not everything is it there's not just like a overnight success. That
No.
overnight success that people are talking about is a lot of hard years and a lot of hard work where all of a sudden you can look back and be like, oh, wow, we're doing it. I feel like it doesn't just happen and you wake up, you're like, oh,
No.
wait, like, look, yeah, 7 figures. Like, what's going on? Like, okay, we got something happening, but it's so much work. And I think, especially in the beginning, and as you get to the 8 and 10 year mark, like it still takes time to continuously be a visionary, to have creativity, to be innovative. Like we don't want to grow stagnant. And so I love that even as you are in best practice media, like the nature of seeing, and I would love to also talk about that, of stepping
Yeah.
into that this year, because when I first met you, this was happening and I felt that I loved, one, just how you talked about your partner and how you talked about being better together, especially on this podcast and especially in my spirit of what my spirit encompasses. It's all about partnership and collaboration, and finding the things that make us better. And I think that first starts with human connection and people. Like we all have our own innate talents, but then there's that other person that is only going to make the whole thing better. And so would like for you to talk about that decision as well, because you had a very successful firm and then you're like, and I'm exiting and now kind of joining this thing. But maybe the reasons why, and yeah, just that thought process too of moving into that space for this year.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So at the end of last year, so 2023, end of 2023, I was really ready for the next phase of Focus Funnels. And my current partners over there at Focus Funnels, we just kind of saw things differently. I wanted to take it in this one direction. They wanted to take it into a different direction. And so what we did is, with love and gratitude for what we had built together,
Mm-hmm.
we found a really amicable way to kind of part ways. And in that, it opened up an amazing opportunity for me to take half of our clients, pretty much half of my team, and wrap that into a bundle that I went out and got acquired by another agency, by Best Practice Media. And as that happened, like I was able to, in a very short amount of time, dramatically step up our game.
Mm,
And so I now have a female CEO and partner that I work with. And that was really important to me because we work with a lot of female, founders, especially in the direct to consumer space. And so I wanted to have that connection where she could understand what they're going through, because as much as I can relate, like, sometimes I can't. And
mm.
so it's nice to have that, and then just kind of have that energy, the kind of the masculine and the feminine building something together. Because sometimes I get crazy and she'd be like, "Hey,
Mhm.
Taylor, like you're crazy." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, totally. I see
Yeah.
that." Right. And then there's times where I'm like, "Hey, we're not going to do that. Like you're being too nice." Right. So
Yeah.
there's like, it's this great balance that we have, which is really cool. But as part of that, we were able to step up our game by adding new niches that we support. So like coaches, consultants, high ticket coaching programs. Best practice has been really good in that space. And then I come from the e-commerce space. So I brought over
Hmm.
my e-com team, and now we've melded visions. So we're able to support more founders, build more funnels, which is super cool. And then our team is now twice the size. So we have 19 full-time employees at Best Practice Media, which is really cool. And we're
Hmm.
just getting started.
I love it so much. Yeah, I think figuring out, well, one, I want to acknowledge that transition, because we had a similar transition in Amani Collective where we moved from a nonprofit, moved into a hybrid, became a business. And when I first was a business, I had a 50-50 partner and stepped out of that as well. But there are ways, right? We hear horror stories, and there's also ways to do it with a lot of love, gratitude, and grace. And I feel
Yeah.
like we had a similar story where it was very much at the end of the day, like our visions were different, and it was amicable, like, and there was a lot of grace and love towards like making those decisions. So I do want to encourage people that if you do have a partner, or you're thinking of one, or whatever that setup might be, um that it doesn't always have to stay that way. And if it does, awesome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to be willing to have hard conversations. So I love the advice you gave of like, well, you got to do hard things. Like, first of all, we're going to have to do really hard things, and we have to have the work ethic around that. And at the same time, we also have to be willing to have hard conversations. And that doesn't mean we can come with that with such a different energy. I think people think hard conversations have to look a certain way, but
Yeah.
if we don't have them, then like I didn't have a hard conversation, to be honest, for I waited too long to have that, and I lost a lot of money. Like I'm
Yeah.
excited that I mean, I'm blessed that Amani Collective is still even here today, because I look back and I'm like, man, like if we would have made these decisions even 6 months ahead of time, we would have saved so much time, effort, money. And so I think, yeah, for any entrepreneur, especially in bootstrapping, and to have the success of scale, you have to trust yourself when you're doing that, and moving forward.
I like the principle of courage,
Mm,
because courage is this concept. I think we have it wrong a lot, but courage is this concept that people think it's the lack of fear.
mm,
But it's actually the opposite. It's taking action despite fear. It's taking action even though you are scared to death. And that's courage. And I think one of the biggest parts of entrepreneurship is having courage. And it was really hard. Me and my old partner, we had been working together for like 6+ years. We
mm-hmm,
went from 2 clients to 50. We went from $10,000 a month to a 7-figure roll rate,
mm-hmm,
and we had all these people responsible to us. And it was really hard for both of us. It took a ton of courage on both sides to say, hey, this isn't working anymore.
mm-hmm,
Like we have very different visions. And then it took a lot of courage to come to the table and get creative on how do we do this without burning everything down,
mm-hmm,
right? And we were able to figure that out in a really cool way. The last thing I'll share about that is there really are no rules in business, meaning you can do things however you want. Like there's no set way that says you have to exit like this, or you have to do things this way. That's like kind of the
Yes.
fun of entrepreneurship.
Preach.
Like
Please preach.
you can get super creative.
Yeah.
And like the way that we structured this exit was really creative, but it served everybody, which was really cool. And so I think that the piece that I will say, what you touched on, is be courageous. And sometimes that means speaking up your truth and being like, hey, this doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah. I do a keynote that's called Living the Fearless Life. Like we're very aligned, and I say being fearless is not, yeah, the absence of fear. It's actually just walking through that fear with courage and knowing
Yep.
that you're going to have to feel it. Because I think it's so important. And I would say also a number one, when someone has asked me, and I'm curious your answer. Well, actually, I'll ask you first. What is your number one fear in this journey or in entrepreneurship, and as you hold this position as well?
Yeah. My number one fear is failing.
Yep.
And I've done a lot of self-development work on this, and it still like chokes me up, right?
Hmm.
And there's a couple levels I don't want to fail on. The first one is I'm doing this for my family, for my wife, for my kids. Like, I don't want to let them down. And the second one is I'm doing this for my team, for my partner. Like, I don't want to let them down. And then the
Hmm.
third one is my clients. I don't want to let them down. And so you have all these things, but what I've learned is that um like the only way we can fail is to quit.
Hmm.
Like is to stop trying. And I haven't done that yet. Like I get up every day and I do my work and I do my best and I take care of my people, and it's been working, but that is definitely my number one fear is failure.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's like something I hate to admit, because I've had a lot of self work on this too, of like, okay, what if it's like ripped all away like tomorrow? Like who am I then? Like what does that look like? Where's my identity? And especially being very grounded in my faith, like walking through this and like, okay, what does this mean? But at the same time, it's like at the end of the day, I come back to that. I'm like, yeah, it's the fear to failure on those levels, that it's so much more than myself. There's so many people involved in it. And the fear of letting them down, I think and it's something that is important. I think anyone listening to like identify it and grapple with it and know that it's there, not let it consume you, but know that it's there, because if we don't acknowledge it, I think it can be, a whole can of worms. But I do like the fact that you said just not quitting, because
Yeah.
um yeah, just keep going.
Just
We're
keep
going to
going.
continue to be knocked down, like always, but just keep
Always.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's this duality that I've found I have to balance. It's this fear of failure, and that comes from a lot of places. It comes from scarcity, it comes from things that haven't worked out in the past, right? And it also just becomes like blind fear that if you let it manifest too much can like sink the whole boat, right? So
Hmm.
there's this duality of the fear of failure, but then also on the other side of that coin, you have to have this calm sense that you're okay,
Hmm.
that everything's okay right now. Like take a breath. There's no lion about to eat us. Like we're safe right now. We've got what we need and it's gonna work out. And when you can balance those two things, it creates the right amount of drive for you to really excel without burning out.
Hmm. I want to talk about that really quick, kind of like practical advice you can give, because I think that's where we see quote failure, quote unquote failure.
Yeah.
That's where we see people quitting. That's where we see burnout, is when this tenacity and this resiliency actually dissipates. It's not there. And I do truly believe it takes this blend of talents, personality, and a certain type of person with some grit to be an entrepreneur, because it is hard work. And we're not saying we're on a different pedestal or caliber, but it is to be like, hey, warning, warning, like you are stepping into a hard journey, but also a beautiful journey if you can find that balance. So what are some practical things that maybe you have done, and some advice that you can give, that when you are in those moments that feel like you have reached rock bottom, to wake up the next day and not quit and to keep going?
Yeah. So there's actually a lot that I do. Um, So let me share a couple principles. The first one is there are no emergencies in business. There are no emergencies in business.
I'm going to give
Meaning,
snaps to that. It's
yeah,
like, yeah.
like nobody's dying, nobody's bleeding out, like we're not at war, like we're just doing business. So there's no emergencies. There's nothing that has to be solved immediately,
Mm-hmm.
right? And too many people are pushing their nervous system so high with stress, thinking that this is a make it or break it emergency, that their bodies literally get worn out. So the
Mm-hmm.
first thing is you got to understand no emergencies in business. The second principle that you have to understand is that this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 5 years to build a 7-figure agency. Have some people done it faster? Sure. But like that was my race. And I just took it slow and steady, one
Mm-hmm.
step at a time. And that created resiliency and it created faster wins and like momentum built faster. So the way that corporate America measures themselves is on quarters. That's ridiculous. Like it's so broken. As bootstrap entrepreneurs, you need to be looking at it from years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having a little dip over a month or two, that's normal. Like don't give up, just keep going, right? So
Yeah.
this is a marathon, not a sprint. And you got to be in the game for the long one. The last one I will say is you have to take care of yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
and here's some things that have been really helpful for me. One is I do a lot of sauna and cold plunge. And so on the sauna, I'll play like some really relaxing music and I'll just breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be like, this is so beautiful that I get to do this right now. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I do is I take a lot of time to disconnect from work,
Mm-hmm.
where like this weekend, I'm going to take my kids, we're going to go skiing. I will literally leave my phone at the cabin. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not responding to anything. I'm gone for a couple of days and taking that time to just recover. So I think that there are three principles: no emergencies in business. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And the last one is you got to take care of yourself because that's the reason you're doing this anyways, right?
Yeah.
Is for more free time, like more autonomy. Like that's why a lot of us left corporate America. So I think those are the three principles that have served me really well.
I like that. When I come visit, I'll jump in the cold plunge.
You
I've always
got to.
wanted I've always wanted to try that.
They're the best.
All right. All right. I'm putting it on my list when we
Like you
visit.
get seriously, if you do it right, meaning you're in hot and then you get right into the cold and then you get out back into hot, you get a full natural high.
Yeah, that's what I've
Like you are
heard.
buzzing.
Yeah. I've almost like thought about buying those like portable ones.
Yeah.
I actually get that they're listening to me because every day those ads, man, you know about the ads. So
I know
they
about those
target me.
ads.
They target me very
Yeah.
hard. And I'm like, ooh, one day, one day I'm
They know
gonna
who you
convert.
are.
They know who I am.
Yeah.
No, that's so great. I just read a quote the other day about like the amount of sleep that the leader, the CEO gets equates to the health of like the culture of the organization, something in that nature. But I found that I mean, it's so true. The amount of time that we truly care for us, like that's going to really resonate in how we're leading and how the organization is. And again, it's going to get the different, like we're always going to have we produce the chemicals that run through our body, and it starts with that mindset. So we have the complete control to be able to have the happy ones, the serotonin and the all the
Yeah.
good stuff in our body versus us being in this like fight, flight, or freeze mode. And you can tell, like I can look back at my journey, and 2018 is always a year that I think about, man, I was a I was kind of just really mean, but it was mainly because I was so stressed, right? And that just
Yeah.
overwhelmed my team. And you can see how that so affects culture and performance and all of that. And so I think those are great principles, like start to care for yourself. And I think the biggest excuse entrepreneurs make is that I just don't have enough time. And
Yeah.
my advice is find the time because like you're not going to last. Like there
You're
is
not going
like
to
you're
last.
yeah, you will burn out. Like we can all
100%.
think, yeah, I think sadly, any like long, like entrepreneur has been around for at least a decade or so, like can think of those moments that have happened and they've had to pick themselves back up. And it's like, we never want to get back to those. And we always want people not to go through those. So listen to
Yeah.
us now.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself.
It's huge. And like there's a phrase, and it can be triggering for some people, but like kings and queens eat first,
Mm,
meaning you're building a micro kingdom for yourself. And like if you're not eating first, the kingdom dies and everyone in
yeah.
it dies. And so it's like you've got to take care of yourself first, and then you can take care of everyone else.
Yeah, I talk a lot about this actually because this will be triggering for some of my listeners, but I think it's really important because I touch on a lot about self-sustainability, that if you don't care for yourself, your impact will die. It will dissipate. It will not be in existence. And that's really important. Because I harp on servant leadership and all of that. And although that's important, there's also this transformational leadership that we're a part of in this, and it starts with who we are. There was a big part of my journey moving from like a nonprofit hat into my full on CEO hat and making this switch of understanding what is profitable, that still cares for my people, that's sustainable, and having these hard conversations. And I had one person sit me down, and it was like mind blowing. For the longest time, I never paid myself. I was like, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. And they were like, isn't it so interesting, Jenny, that you care so much about providing dignified work for so many people, but you don't do it for yourself? And I was like, like I just had like a
Oh my
moment of,
gosh.
yeah, it just like hit me like my chest. And it's such a core memory because it was from that moment that I was like, oh my gosh, shit. I like care so much about people, and I like
Yeah.
want them to get like not only what they're like the minimum wage, overseas, but even more and 10
Yeah.
times. And I'm just like, I care so much about that. And then I'm like scrounging for like some beans on my plate because I'm not even like can't even afford to
Totally.
put dinner on the table for my family because that was so true for a good amount of time and in the journey. And
Wow.
anyways, and so yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Um, it is a hard thing to hear, but at the same time, there's a beautiful, like, again, reframing, that it doesn't have to be in this really icky way when we say that, yeah, kings and queens need to
Oh,
be fed first, because you do need to care for yourself or you will not last. And then whatever you're doing will not last. And it's
yeah.
important for long term for sure.
I love that. I love it.
That's so good. That's so good. Okay, we are coming to the end. We could talk for hours, but one, there's a couple things before I get to my last question. I would love for people to know, like, what is kind of your ideal partner, customer, how people can get in touch
Oh,
with you. That alone, how can people get in touch if they want to connect? Also, not just in the marketing side, but also for you, like I know that you are doing more speaking or coaching or different things. So I would love for you to share that. I might be steering that the wrong way, but would love for you to to share however anyway people can be inspired by you alone as Taylor and not just best practice media too.
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the fastest way to hit us up is bestpracticemedia.com is our website. Tons of resources on there. People can reach out to us, schedule time to chat. We work in two spaces. We do a ton in e-commerce. So if you've got an e-commerce brand you're looking to grow, we'd love to talk with you. And then we do a lot with coaches, consultants, digital courses, that type of thing. We are very good at building acquisition funnels there. So if you're looking for help there. And then on LinkedIn, I post quite frequently about life and thoughts and everything that I'm going through, and just trying to share that with other entrepreneurs because the journey can sometimes feel a little bit lonely out there.
Hmm.
So, and I'm
Yeah.
just Taylor Frame. You can just search for me on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. We'll have all of that in the show notes as we always do. So you guys will get to find them in that way. And as we end today, I love to leave this community with just a dose of inspiration for the next week. So what is one last thing to live by that you would love to share with the Moxie community today?
Imperfect action always trumps everything else. So consistent imperfect action is the absolute fastest way to do anything, whether it's working on yourself, building a business, raising a family. Just take imperfect action. Even though it's not ideal, or maybe you don't know all the answers, you just take that next step and like amazing things happen.
Mic drop. Thank you so much for being here today. And as always, community, Moxie on.